Good morning, everybody. So in today's lesson, we're going to be learning about the one class of vertebrates, which are the fish. So, and right now, the waters are opening up, more people are out on the lake fishing, and so this is kind of relevant, pertinent, particularly if you are a person who fishes. You may find this particularly interesting. All right, so we're going to begin with talking just generally about fish. So, generally speaking, we would say that there are one thing that they have in common, which is that they all use gills. They're going to use gills, which are openings on the sides of their bodies. In some way, there's an opening, and that's how they exchange carbon dioxide for oxygen within the water. So they don't have a respiratory system as we know it. They have gills. So we typically will divide the fish into three different groups: jawless fish, cartilaginous fish, and bony fish. So let's begin. We're going to start by talking about the jawless fish. I'm going to just move up my slide just a little teensy-weensy bit. There we go, to show you one such jawless fish. So maybe you're thinking, well, how does it not have a jaw? Well, I'm going to talk about what it has instead of a jaw. So a good example of it would be something like this. And for those of you that are well versed in aquatic organisms, you may recognize this as a lamprey. I'm going to talk more about lampreys in general. But one thing about class Agnatha that we can say is that their skin is going to be slimy, and their body is going to be soft. Okay, it's going to feel like an eel, and they're going to lack what we call paired fins. Now, that's not to say that it doesn't have fins. It has fins. They're just not paired fins. So what would paired fins look like? Well, that would be the case where maybe we had a fin on one side of the body and then another one that is the mirror image on the other side. But we are not seeing that here. So I'm going to get rid of that. So those are a couple of characteristics that we see. Let's move on. So they have a cartilaginous body, which is not to say that they're a cartilaginous class of fish, but they have a cartilaginous skeleton. So think of cartilage and the division between your nose, that septum, that's cartilage. Your ear has cartilage, and so on and so forth. It's not bone, it's just this flexible material. Okay, so lampreys, as I said, and so lampreys are an organism. It's a bit of an invasive species. I'm going to show you what their mouth looks like now, so brace yourselves. So this is a lamprey's mouth, and it looks something out of a horror film. It has these sort of sharp teeth-like projections that are sort of circular. There's like the hole leading to the interior of its body, but its mouth is like a sucker. Okay, it's like, and it sucks onto other organisms, aquatic organisms, and it was a big problem, I believe, with pickerel, walleye, or pike. I think it's pickerel. In some of our Georgian Bay waters, we used to have this amazing fishery economy in the Georgian Bay region, but lampreys quickly put an end to that. I think, in fact, there's a display at Kilbear Provincial Park, or it might possibly be Killarney, I'm not sure. But anyway, the lamprey, what it would essentially do with its sucker-like mouth and hard teeth is it would just attach itself to another aquatic organism like the pickerel, and basically it tears a big hole in it and will suck out its blood and fluids, eventually either weakening the organism, leaving it open to disease, or simply killing it altogether. So super invasive species. Maybe one of you can find a video on YouTube and share it with us on Google Classroom about lampreys if you find one that's appropriate. All right, moving on. So the next class of fish is the cartilaginous fish. Those are a class, this is a mouthful, chondrichthyes. And so, well, what are those like? The sharks are one example of that, although there are others. So what do they all have in common? They all have, I'm going to just raise this up again so we see the stepwise. They all have that cartilaginous skeleton, similar to what we saw with the jawless fish. They're going to have biting jaws, though. That is one difference. And they will often have teeth that constantly shed and replace. And they use that to capture and tear apart their prey. Let me see if I can just pull up here. I'm going to pull up a browser and see if I can look up shark teeth or shark jaw and teeth. Oh. Let's see what we can find. Oh, this is a good one. So there you can see the rows and rows of teeth that we see in a shark, so rows and rows. So basically, once these teeth fall out, the next layer sort of just like rolls up and replaces it. Let's get rid of that. All right, so next. So the nostrils are connected to these smell organs, and they will use those smell organs to locate prey. They also use electromagnetism as well. They have these lateral lines, these pits along the side of their body that will allow them to detect movement in water. I saw a documentary some time ago about how in Australia, some scientists, I believe, they created this sort of electromagnetic wall or barrier, and so that allowed the sharks to avoid certain areas, and so people could feel safe in the waters there because the shark would avoid those areas with those electromagnetic boundaries. And if you know anything more about that, I would be great for you to share in our Google Doc, in our Google Classroom post. Okay, so moving on. So they have paired fins. Well, now we can see some paired fins in this shark, for instance, right? It's going to have this fin right here, and then one on the mirror image on the other side as well, and then some in the back. So what do they use those for? Well, that just gives them enhanced stability, and it gives them enhanced maneuverability. It just makes them a little bit more, I guess, nimble, you would say, maybe in the water, right? But we can see definitely a lot more complexity in this shark, which is our exemplar for a cartilaginous fish. So this lateral line would be along here. Our gills openings are there. So depending on the type of shark, you might see different numbers of different amounts of gills and so on and so forth. All right, but however, sharks are not the only type of cartilaginous fish in class Chondrichthyes that we're going to look at, but it is important to mention the others as well. So some others that we will see are the skate. So you maybe have seen these if you've been to an aquarium, or an array. When I was in Florida, I went to an opportunity where I got to swim with some rays, and that was really cool. Some of them were quite large. And so, you can see that they have also some sort of paired fins here as well. So skates we don't think of as often, but rays as well, like stingrays. But what all these also these organisms also have in common is that they lack a swim bladder. So swim bladder is basically like an inflatable almost pouch inside the organism that allows them some buoyancy and allows them to maneuver in different sort of sections of the water, different levels above and below within the water. So they don't have one of those. So that means they have to continuously move or else they will sink. So the last class of fish that I want to talk about today is class Astaxis. And so these are when people say fish, I think most people think of the bony fish. So let's get right to it. And so these are just a few examples, but there are many more obviously that exist, like the trout, the salmon, the pickerel, the walleye that I talked about earlier, and so on and so forth. They will typically have that bony skeleton that we talk about. Maybe I can find a picture. Well, a picture of that. So fish, bony skeleton. Right. So if you've ever had occasion to fillet a fish, then you will have seen sort of that bony skeleton that we speak of. Um, anyway, back to our video. Okay, they have this protective plate called an operculum that covers the gill. And again, if you have any experience fishing and you fillet a fish, you will know what I'm talking about. It's like this hard sort of plate that we find just covering the gills right there. And, you can imagine that its function is obviously to protect that respiratory organ. So other things that we should know, they have a two-chambered heart. So, I just want to talk about that for a second before we move on. So let me just cover up some of this. So they have a two-chambered heart. So, how many heart chambers does a human heart have? A human heart has 4. So, if I'm just drawing a rough little sort of drawing of that, ooh, I don't know what just happened there. We have 2 chambers where there is some oxygenated blood, right? So I'm going to go like oxygenated, 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 and we have 2 chambers where it's deoxygenated, right? So that allows us to really control the flow and what is going where and so on and so forth, and just enhances the complexity and pumping ability of that organ. But in a fish, they only have 2 chambers, and you can imagine what those 2 chambers are. One's going to have deoxygenated blood and one's going to contain oxygenated. So the level of complexity is obviously reduced. So another point to mention is that they do have a swim bladder. So it is filled with oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon dioxide. So in other words, air. And so, again, what is the point of a swim bladder? It helps the fish to maintain a buoyancy and to be able to change depths within the water. That may be because, depending on the depth of the water, the oxygen levels will change. Remember, colder water will have more dissolved oxygen in it typically, and so fish that have a higher oxygen demand might need to move into the lower depths of their aquatic environment in order to access higher oxygen levels. As you would imagine, when air enters into the swim bladder, the fish is going to rise. Think about it like if you were to take a deep breath in while you were in a body of water, you would likely become more buoyant. And when air moves into the blood from the swim bladder, then the fish is going to sink in the same way that if you were to exhale, your buoyancy would be decreased. I'm going to see if I can pick up on our browser here a picture of an image of a swim bladder, just for reference sake. Let's see what the Google can find. Okay, so I'm liking this one right now for now. Right, so just sort of along with the internal organs, there's our swim bladder located there. I'm going to see if I can find another picture, another image, maybe one with the real deal there. Oh, I like this one. There we go. Right, so there's our swim bladder in real time. So if you've ever filleted a fish, then you will recognize that organ. All right, so that is it for today's lesson. I'm going to post a few questions in Google Classroom for you to answer, and look out for a little mini quizzes, not a quiz, but a quizzes for tomorrow to practice your learning.